question is, part one is, can herbs or something be used instead of antibiotics, and which herbs, and are they as effective, and do they use antibiotics or something else in the 200 other countries outside the United States? So one is, if you have an infection, do you need antibiotics, or is there some alternative? That's the first part. The second question is, do you need probiotics after you've taken antibiotics? Is that what you're supposed to do? And then the third part is, in general, if you've screwed up your gut microbiome over the years with antibiotics and poor living, what do you do? And then the fourth part is, assume you listen to all these answers and you think you've got some great information, and this part's for you, Margaret, and you go home and you tell your partner, and your partner's completely emotionally shut down to you. So the first three parts are nutritional, and the fourth is, what do you do when you have a partner who is emotionally shut down to this information and a lot of your life? They're pretty much emotionally shut down, and it's very lonely. What do you do about it? So that's the question for everyone.
You know, there's nothing you can do about somebody who's not open to learning about what's important to you and what may be important to them physically and emotionally and in the relationship. And one of the things that happens so often is people go in to try and convince somebody. The best way is to role model it. Mm-hmm. The best way is to learn to take responsibility for yourself. If you're excited about this, go home and do it. You don't have to convince somebody. But if you do it and you start to feel better, you have more vitality, you're more alive, you're more loving, you're more really into life, they're going to eventually, hopefully say, gee, I wonder what you're doing. We have to let go of trying to control other people and become the role models.
And if I can just address the herbs and antibiotics, my wake-up call for herbs and their power, their antibiotic power, was when I was dying of dysentery in Kathmandu, Nepal in 1983. I'd lost about 35 pounds. I was on the toilet about 100 times a day. I could barely stand up. Went to an Ayurvedic physician who inspired no confidence in me whatsoever. He put me on a wooden table and he kind of held his hand over my abdomen and said, I know what's the matter with you. And in my inner dialogue was, sure you do, buddy. I didn't know at the time he was the head of the Nepal Ayurvedic Association and was one of the most brilliant doctors in Asia. But I had bacteria just raging through my system. It was like all the Nordic hordes had shown up with their axes and were just sort of hacking their way through my intestines. And he gave me a powder, just a curious powder, and then he gave me these very, very suspicious looking pellets that looked like rabbit droppings. And he said, take this powder, put a teaspoon of it in water before you eat, and take 3 of these and your symptoms will stop. And I thought, I will do this once before lunch before I call the Amsterdam embassy to get medevaced out of here. And I did that. He told me to do this 3 times a day for 9 days. The diarrhea stopped in a couple of hours. The fever broke and I could walk. And I went, okay, I'd been using herbs for sore throat and all kinds of things for years, but never to save my life. University of Kentucky did a study about 25 years ago now showing the antibacterial activity of different herbs. And most of this had to do with bacteria that can cause food poisoning. So Salmonella, Campylobacter, Yersinia, perfringens, common bacteria that can make you quite sick in food. Turmeric killed everything. Garlic killed everything. Onion killed everything. And then in descending order, other things like oregano and basil also showed very profound antimicrobial effects against those bacteria. So it is the case that you can unquestionably reduce the potential for bacterial problems by taking any number, and I mean using herbs. I don't mean getting capsules. I mean actually cooking with them, eating these things as foods. Eating onions and garlic and other things, eating turmeric, eating hot chilies. Hot chilies kill everything, including sometimes the person who eats them. And that leads to all kinds of stories that I don't think we have time for me to share, but I've had some great incidents with hot chilies out there in the trail. But I would also say there are bacteria that are so gravely serious that sometimes you just plain have to jump on them with an antibiotic temporarily. I travel with 500 milligrams ciprofloxacin tablets. I rarely use them, but if I wind up going downhill with real dysentery, I take one of those and another one 12 hours later, and I'm done. So yes, herbs can demonstrate very significant antibacterial, i.e. antibiotic activity. They can help to reduce or completely eliminate the risk of many forms of bacterial illness. There was a study done with oysters a bunch of years ago had a small amount of salmonella, and they challenged that salmonella with Louisiana brand hot sauce, and it killed it on the spot. So the idea of putting hot, like Tabasco or something, on an oyster and then eating the oyster is very sensible from a bacterial standpoint. In parts of Africa where there's little or no refrigeration, they make a mashed paste out of crushed salt, ground hot chilies, and onion, and you put a little bit of that paste on your plate, and as you eat foods that might possibly contain bacteria, you do a little bite of this stuff. And if you do that on a regular basis, it will kill the bacteria, and therefore you won't get sick. So, long-winded answer, yes, herbs can demonstrate significant antibacterial properties, and there may be times when the emergency is so great that on a temporary basis, you need to get an antibiotic into you.
I'd like to say that for me, I haven't done this research, but I don't know if you know about lauricidin. It's made out of coconuts, and it just seems to stop anything in its tracks, and carnivora. So you might want to look that up. The carnivora is really expensive, like a little bottle. It's Venus flytrap. And but they both seem to be really excellent in stopping anything, so you might want to look that up.
So there's a lot of herbs.
Lauricidin, Lauriciden. You can get it on Amazon. And carnivora, I wouldn't get it on Amazon. You have to go to the company that really creates that, and you can look it up. Carnivora is Venus flytrap. It used to be illegal until President Reagan demanded it because it helped him, and then it became it used to be illegal, and now it's legal because of President Reagan.
So in our integrative practice, when we look at a patient that has an infection, upper respiratory sinus or urinary tract, for example, then this is when you look at using plant medicines, making sure potency and the purity is key, because you're looking at the phytochemicals that are in those herbs that have those antibacterial, antimicrobial properties. And this is where it's really important, because a lot of people, aside of eating the foods that he was mentioning, like eat garlic and all those things like that, but when people buy supplements, then you're varying your ability in terms of to have that antimicrobial effect or the kill effect using it as a natural antibiotic. So you have to be really careful when you use those things. Now, we use them all the time in our practice, but then we have to look at standardized products that we know a certain dosage, and we have studies to say, then this is the dose that I give for this kind of problem, because I need that patient to have a response. Otherwise, we do have to pull, unfortunately, out every once in a while an antibiotic. But what a lot of people forget is that these are antimicrobials. So just because they're a plant doesn't mean that they're not also killing your microbiome on the other level. They're less toxic than ciprofloxacin, which I would never give, and I'll tell you later why you shouldn't take that. But he's too good of a guy. We don't want that to happen to him.
It's a rarity.
Anyways, but what you have to understand is that when people take these things long term, because you'll see that a lot of products in the health market, like, oh, I think I have a candida problem, or I think I have a parasite problem, or I think I have some kind of infection, and they just take it continuously to prevent it. What they're doing is they're disrupting their microbiome, and we have patients that we can demonstrate that in, because we're testing before, during, or after. And so we have to be careful when we use plant medicines that we have to respect it, that they are medicines. And a lot of times people think, like, I'm just going to take this, prevent this, I'll just take this every day. And certain herbs, like he was talking about, actually will only kill bad bacteria and not the good things. And certain herbs actually kill both. And so we have to really be skilled at understanding that that's when, so when we teach our patients, it's like we want to teach them how to do home care. So it's like, you don't call me, these are the things that you should be doing, and we will teach them. And then if it goes even further, like when we get past, say, a bacterial infection, and then it's more viral in nature, then we looking at using certain things like a coated, patentable form of a nanoparticle silver. And this is something that we could give and deliver to knock out bacteria or viruses that is easy to take. But we then have to look at, what's that dose? Is there studies to show that its effectiveness versus what may be on the market? A lot of people market like colloidal silvers and these other things like that. And we like to look at the direct studies and saying, is those products actually, what they're claiming, is it safe? Is it actually going to bioaccumulate and stay in your tissue, or are you going to excrete it? Does that form of product affect your microbiome or doesn't? And so we're very particular when we prescribe things, because I want to avoid an antibiotic as much as possible. One pill of an antibiotic can cause GI dysfunction up to 18 months later. Okay, so we need antibiotics. Sometimes we have surgery, we have car accidents, we have gunshot wounds. We need these things, but we have to start using them very sparingly and only in certain cases, because there's a lot of natural things that we can use. But we also want people, especially when we're trying to educate people, now things are available on the internet, that not just say, well, I'm just keep on taking this, and not understanding like what else is this causing, and just to leave it there, why it's so important. Because now that when we test microbiome, and we test it on every patient now, is that when someone comes back with a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or a candida or a parasite or some kind of overgrowth or infection, the panels that we're looking at not only test what is sensitive and resistant to, meaning like which antibiotic you should take that could be effective or which won't be effective, but they also have a panel of the natural antimicrobials. And we've been seeing in the last 10 years with our patients now, the natural antimicrobials are becoming resistant because people take them too often, because they take it as a dietary supplement rather than treating it as a plant medicine. So we have to be very careful, because a lot of things that you'll see on the internet, like, oh, here's the essential oil revolution, take this every day to prevent something, now it's actually causing dysfunction in their microbiome, and now there's resistance, so we can't use this as the go-to what we used to.